Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck design video. Today I'm going to be going over a new deck I just put together. This is a Jhoira of the Ghitu deck, Jhoira, or however you want to pronounce her. The only reason I actually developed this deck is because a friend of mine saw a foily Modern Master Jhoira and he picked it up thinking I would like it, and he was right. I've always wanted to build her. I've never actually done it before. I tend to avoid the common versions of what you would see a deck do. And most people see Jhoira and assume that there's going to be some mass land destruction like an apocalypse followed by like an elderazi followed up. I wanted to make a deck that did not do anything like that. So I had a lot of possibilities. I should probably run through what she does first. Jhoira here is an Izzet General, one of the really good ones. She only costs 3 mana, 1 a blue and a red, and she's a 2/2 human wizard. She has the ability to, at instant speed, I can pay 2 colorless to exile, essentially put any permanent, a non-land permanent, or spell, instant or sorcery, or even a planeswalker, into the exile zone with 4 suspend counters, which means in 4 turns, that card, every upkeep that you remove a suspend counter, and then eventually the card will come into play when you remove the last one. If it's a creature, it actually gains haste. What most people do will just stack it so that you can do 2 at a time, so 2 spells coming in, you control the stack, you can destroy everything and then land a giant creature with haste. And if it's something like an elderazi or an ink moth or a blightsteel colossus, you typically win. Mass land destruction is something I like, but I don't like making my metas experience. So I decided I had to do something unique with her and different. There's a lot of possibilities. Being a human wizard, my first idea was to do wizard tribal, but with a zombie in the main 99 and not in the command zone, it really just felt like a generic Izzet good stuff deck, a low-powered wizard deck. There's a whole bunch of other possibilities too. Like what I would like the idea of doing was a burn deck where I could somehow generate infinite mana, draw my whole deck, and then float everything with her. Everything essentially panned down to me needing to get a lot of cards in my hand to make use of her. So this actually turned into a combo deck. If you've seen my Jeleva combo where it uses Enter the Infinite and Beacon of Tomorrows, that's what this has essentially turned into. That Jeleva deck has been seeing so much hate that I essentially just decided to permanently retire her, and I've shifted my combo over to Jhoira. That's actually not good for my opponents either, because the Jeleva deck is entirely spontaneous. It's very disruptive and chaotic, and I never am guaranteed my combo. I am now on a card or a deck where I don't actually have to rely on a combat step to get my combo off. I don't accidentally exile it. Most people see that she costs 3 mana, but an experienced player will know that Jhoira actually costs 5 mana because it's 3 to cast her, but you can retain and float something immediately, or you can hold up counter magic and do this at the end of someone else's turn. The only time you would want to float something immediately is if there's the fear of a sudden demise or one of the split-second kill spells, so you cannot use her. If your meta does not do that, then obviously the 5 mana means that you're going to hold up some 2 mana counterspell or more, and then use her ability at the end of the opponent's turn. So this is another combo deck. This is kind of a mix right now. I've done a little bit of playtesting with some friends in Morgantown a while away. I haven't taken this to my 2 main tables here where I live. So far it's panned out very strong and well. After the opponents figure out what I'm doing, they usually just auto-target me. One poor sap has accidentally, well, not accidentally, he extracted my combo out of my deck, and then I spent the entire game just focusing on him, which he decided he will never extract my combo again. Let's go through the deck real quick, and I'll show you exactly how this is running. It runs the same attempted combo that my Jeleva deck does. It does not rely or need that combo to win. It has lots of ways of getting there, but also has lots of other ways of abusing this as well. So we'll stick her over here. To be honest, Jhoira rarely needs to see play. Sometimes she's there to help us bait out a removal or some kind of wipe, or if I just want some general advantage. Creature package is actually pretty light. This is kind of reminiscent where I was thinking about Wizard Tribal. So we have a Snapcaster, Archaeomancer, and Izzet Chronarch are here for recovery. There is an Intuition package in here, and these two are great for that, but also just using any kind of spell that I've used earlier. Silumgar Sorcerer is a new one. It's just another creature counterspell. You'll most likely be stacking yourself, since as you see there's not a lot of creatures here. Venser is a veritable counter, essentially just put something into your hand. He's another wizard. Teferi is probably the most thematic and important creature in this deck. The deck tends to take a lot of extra turns, not just from the infinite combo. There's a lot of time-based and themed cards in here. Timey-wimey, Doctor Who, whatever you want to call it. One of my friends already called this the Doctor Who deck, since everything's based on time, and that's the theme and the gimmick here. But what he does for the combo, I'll explain it shortly, but he actually helps us lock the combo in place. There's a lot of things Teferi does, but in this deck it's not just disruption, it's not just like, there's no knowledge pool combo, it's just him assisting locking the combo in place. Flavorfully, he's also one of Jhoira's friends from the original storyline too. I don't have Karn in here, of course, but he's here for one specific reason. Aeon Chronicler, I'm thinking about taking out. He's the only non-wizard, so if I took him out, this would technically be a human wizard tribal. He's here just so I can float him with Jhoira. Costing 2 mana to gain 4 extra cards over 4 turns is nice. My initial goal of making it not big creatures, like I didn't want any big creatures and I didn't want any land destruction here at all. He kind of breaks that goal. If I do get my Enter the Infinite off, he's going to be like a 70-70, possibly more. So he may not make the cut. He's really good at just drawing a couple extra cards though, so I'm on the fence. He may be cut soon, but he really is a card that needs to be in the deck for what this deck does. 2 mana to draw 4 extra cards over 4 turns, and eventually netting a body with haste is good. Let's go on to a draw package here. So this turned out to the combo parts of the deck. It doesn't take a lot of cards to fix that combo in place. So a lot of the deck is counter and draw. There's a massive counter suite coming up, but let's get the draw stuff out of the way first. Ancestral Visions is not quite on theme, it's just a good card. It's always there to help me draw. Steam Augury and Fact are great at peeling cards off. Reoccurring Insight is just a big draw spell. Then there's a tutor package, because I do need to get some of the cards coming up. I'll show you which ones they are. Reoccurring or Mystical Tutor and Personal Tutor are great at getting a sorcery or any spell on top of my deck. This one will usually go straight for the Enter the Infinite. This one right here, it's situational what I'll get with this. It could be Enter the Infinite, but I need a way of drawing it. Then Merchant Scroll actually will most likely go get Mystical Tutor, so I can chain it into that same spell. Long-term plans as a tutor, they'll just tuck it a couple cards deep. It could be anything I need to sustain myself. Intuition is also a slightly complicated card. There are 4 ways to play this card. There's the bad way, which is just tutor for 3 random targets. The average way is to tutor for 3 threats, 3 things you might need. Like, for example, you need a counterspell, go tutor for 3 counterspells. You need a board wipe, go tutor for 3 board wipes. You'll get one of them. The better way to use this is if you need one specific card. For example, if I need my Enter the Infinite, I can get that and these 2 creatures. No matter what, I'm going to end up getting that Enter the Infinite. That's just one example of many. Ideally, the opponent will try their darnest to make you spend more resources and mana. The best way to use this is if you can actually get all 3 cards. For example, if you had black and you had the enchantment called Phyrexian Reclamation, you could tutor for 3 creatures and you will essentially be able to get all 3 of those creatures to your hand. There's a couple other ways of doing that, but that is the optimal way of using Intuition. Not a lot of ways of using that in this deck. Usually I do the one below that where I'm needing a particular card and I'm using other cards to guarantee that I get that one card. Another version, a lot of people like using Nykthos and Nykthos Untap Abuse. This is really good at getting the Nykthos or ways of recurring Nykthos like Crucible Worlds. And getting out of our tutor and draw package, we're going into... This is honestly a terrible card. It is slightly thematic because it does have Venser and Karn and whatnot. That's the only reason I actually really am wanting to keep it in the deck. It's a possible tutor or draw 3. This is something you do not tutor for your main combo with. This is something I will honestly usually tutor Mystical Tutor for. I'll use Distant Melodies to tutor for this because this could get me something else, or I could just draw 3 cards. But at all costs, do not use this to tutor for the big spell of the deck. Now, as I said, there's a lot of time junk in this deck. There's a lot of themes for taking extra turns. I think we're up to 8 spells that do that. Plea for Power is either going to draw me cards or let me take an extra turn. A lot of people do not like just turn spamming spells. If you know what your deck does, you can make it go fast, and it's better to tell the opponent that you're treating your turn spells like Explorers, the spell that's 1 and a green, you draw a card and play an extra land. A lot of people, if you impress that into them, and since there's so many of these, that's what a lot of these end up being, is literally just mono blue or blue-red Explorer. That's what it ends up being. So Plea for Power is possibly 3 cards or an Explorer. Savior of the Moment is essentially a 3 mana costing Explorer, because I take an extra turn but I don't get to untap, so it's literally Explorer. A lot of people also, when they see Jhoira decks, you'll see tech that removes suspend counters. I opted out of that. The only one I really liked was Fury Charm, because it did also hit artifacts, so it had some other options. It didn't make the cut. And instead, I decided just to take extra turns, because that also removes suspend counters. Time Warp is your normal take an extra turn. Walk the Aeons is a little bit more expensive with a buyback. I don't usually like the buyback. One-time use Exile. This is great for top decking. Beacon of the Tomorrows is the combo turn taking spell. I'll set that over here. Time Stretch takes 2 turns, really good off her. Temporal Trespass is really expensive. Usually it's just going to come off Jhoira. So let's set this over here. And as I said, there's a pretty stout control package in here. Giant chunk of counterspells. I really wanted to get a Glen Alondra Archmage in here. I can't seem to find any extra ones or anyone to trade one right now. So we have Venser and Silumgar Sorcerer as counterspells and creatures, and then the rest of these are counters. Most of these are situational. This is actually a very high curve for the converted mana cost of these counterspells. This is for a multiplayer table. In 1v1, if you've ever played like the Biting Gale or V-Click, when you a competitive draw-go counter EDH deck, your converted mana cost of your counterspells is going to be roughly 2.5 max, and you're going to have about 33 or so counterspells. I'm about 25 in here, plus the extra stuff in the creature board, and there's higher curves, so I can have more hard counters. The smaller curve, the 2 or less counterspells, usually have some limitation to them. But since I have multiple opponents, not just one, I had to have more hard counters. Swan Song's great. It usually just turns some threatening spell into a 2/2 bird. Then we have the normal counterspell. Disdainful Stroke's new. I really like this. In EDH, this might as well just be another counterspell. Muddle the Mixture is great for tutoring anything that costs 2. It could be another tutor to chain into another tutor, for example. Delay is one of my favorite counterspells. It's right on theme with Jhoira here, just making the opponent wait a couple turns. This is great at getting rid of an X spell off the stack like Genesis Wave. Memory Lapse is another one of my faves. We have Negate for non-creatures, and we have a lot of creature counters like the Silumgar Sorcerer. We have the 3 that are essentially 2 mana. I always love this one because it's a sorcery that counters. Of course, you have to explain that to the opponents. Then we have another creature counter that draws you a card, and one that I've been thinking about taking out. I recently removed the Spell Crumple and Hinder out of this deck because I was actually going to trade them off. They're actually still holding value. So this right here may go back to one of those. A 6 mana counterspell sucks, but it may draw me cards. It only hits creatures. Izzet Charm is a counter that makes them pay 2. We're on to like the Mana Leak variants here. Nope, there's Mana Leak. Complicate is a variable Mana Leak that costs more, but I can cycle it to draw a card as well. Sage's Dowsing tends to let me draw a card since I usually have wizards out. Counterflux is a hard counter. Again, another counter I wanted to put in here was Last Word, the 4 mana costing original Counterflux variant. I love that card, but it's also kind of high on the converted mana cost. I may end up taking one of these variable ones out for that. Fairy Trickery is a counter that exiles, counter that exiles, counter that scries, counter that draws a card. We're up to 4 mana now. Counter that untaps. No, not quite a counter. This just exiles the stack. This is one of my favorite pseudo counters. And finally, a command just for reasons. So that's a lot of counterspells. Their curve is much higher than I like. I like my curve for competitive designs to be about 2, 2.5. These counterspells are averaging about 3 and up, so that's pretty bad. Now, that's a lot of answers, but I don't have a lot of board presence answers, so we had to have a couple bounce spells. Cyclonic Rift is great at keeping me alive. Capsize is a possible win condition, since this deck is trying to take infinite turns. And then we have some other time effects. This is more or less another time walk if it is 1v1. This is great at exiling something devastating off the stack I can't deal with. Then we have a time reversal. This just got a a semi-reprint in the new Origins set that's coming out. It hasn't been released yet, it's still being spoiled at the date of recording this video, but there's a 3-mana version of Time Reversal that actually time stops itself. It's a sorcery, so I can't take advantage of the 7 cards I get. It will definitely be in this deck once it is actually released. Temporal Cascade is one of my old favy cards too. You don't see this a lot anymore because it's just expensive and it's been powered, like it's just the reprinting of different versions of this card. The mana cost has dropped significantly. Off Jhoira, of course, I can cast this and twine it for 2. Sometimes I just want to use this to dump the opponent's hand. But I'll get to how this deck actually tends to play out, and something like this is actually important. It's a big draw spell that sits in this deck. Time Spiral is the same, it's just a way of continue on digging through the deck. Mystic Retrieval, I had Pull from the Deep in here, I took that out, it may make its way back in. This is a great way of getting some advantage out of my graveyard, like a Intuition package if I'm going for spells. This is another way of pulling something back. This is also great to trick the opponent because in that Intuition package, I can also flash this back from the graveyard. Spell Twine, same kind of ordeal, just getting advantage out of my graveyard, even the opponent's too. This ends up usually being an extra turn spell. This is the combo spell of the deck. I'll explain this actually right now. So in my Jeleva deck, I only ran Beacon or Dream Halls as an enabler because I was able to use this off Jeleva. Using this off Jeleva, I would then get this or have enough mana to sustain the Beacon of Tomorrows, the spell that essentially I take an extra turn and it shuffles in. This deck also runs an Omniscience since it is less. There's more permanence in here than Jeleva had. So just reiterating the combo if you don't understand, this is a big spell. It costs 12 mana. What it does is I draw my entire deck, I put a card on top. It could be any card I want. Typically, it's actually going to be, if I haven't used it already, Temporal Mastery. With my entire deck in my hand, I will try to resolve Dream Halls first. If Dream Halls resolves, then I can obviously take advantage of it immediately. As an active player, what Dream Halls does is I can discard a card that matches a color of a card, and I can cast a spell for free. For example, if I no longer need to tutor for anything, I can discard this card, and I can cast a Cryptic Command for free. That's just one example. What I will try to do in this deck, if my opponents have gotten used to my combo, so they've tried to include a lot of answers in their decks, I will resolve this first and retain priority. I will then cast Omniscience, and by using this ability, I will again retain priority after casting Omniscience. And with Omniscience on the stack, I will then flash out Teferi, again using the Dream Halls. If Teferi resolves, I have a handful of counterspells and the ability to use it. If Teferi resolves, he will resolve first before Omniscience. And that keeps everything safe, because the opponent will no longer be able to Crows and Grip my enablers. Dream Halls gives the opponent the chance, but as long as I am retaining priority, I can pop this in the stack and then put him in the stack, and he will resolve first, and then I can go nuts. That is the actual primary combo of the deck. It is not necessary half the time. That's just what the deck's trying to do. The deck has lots of ways of abusing other people's stuff, just control magic and Jhoira and whatnot. Lots of time walks. I will usually have a much bigger board presence in the term of lands, since I'm essentially trying to just explore half the time. But with this setup, I can of course continue with the Beacon of Tomorrows. I can take infinite turns, because this will keep shuffling into my 2-card deck. Eventually I'll pull the other card off the deck, but I also have a handful now of extra turn spells. So what I do to actually win, if you saw my Jeleva deck, there's lots of dumb cards in there to win with. This deck actually just wins with Jhoira. You will use Imperial Plate. I have a couple lands that come up so I can actually do combat damage and win with Jhoira. There's a lot of other ways I can do it. Obviously the Aeon Chronicler will be humongous. But that's actually, it's a grindy game until I can get something like that off, and then Jhoira will beat face for the win. I had a couple other things. Rune Chanter's Pike was in here. I had the Wizard Wand, because I like the idea of there's the Diviner's Wand where it auto-equips to a wizard, and if you draw a card, the wizard flies and gets +1/+1 on the turn. So, for example, if I resolved this while the Jhoira was equipped, she would become like an 80/80 flyer until end of turn. Those two were cute. This one is the better card out of all three, so this one made the cut. The only other non-land permanent in this deck is a Soul Ring. There's no other accelerant in this deck. Again, if this was more 1v1, I would probably put a couple other goodies in here just to accelerate out faster. Let's go on to the land base. There is 37 lands currently. I am actually on a budget when I started this, so I probably need to improve the land base first. We have a Command Tower and Cascade Bluffs. A lot of 2-color lands, the Shivan Reef, Steam Vents, Sulphur Falls, Temple of Epiphany is a tap land, but scrying is always nice. This is a looter land. It doesn't tap for color. As you saw, out of all my deck, there's really about 4 spells that have red in the mana cost. So I really don't care about having a whole bunch of colorless lands. Helmar Depths is great at seeing what's coming up. This is great at keeping alive if there's a shield or something coming to kill me. Nets 2 lands. Reliquary Tower is there for obvious reasons to help me sustain myself with the Enter the Infinite combo. Riptide Leptori, I have lots and lots of wizards in my deck. It is almost entirely wizard tribal, except for that Chronicler there. Rogue's Passage is a pseudo win condition when I get my infinite turn loop set up so I can get through a Jhoira. I will have a whatever the buyback bounce spell is, oh really, I can't think of it now. Whatever the buyback bounce spell is, that is a pseudo win condition with this, because I can start bouncing permanents eventually. But if I just want to blatantly say, hey, here's Rogue's Passage and Jhoira has Imperial Plate, that's usually another win condition itself. Giant pile of islands, and there's only 5 mountains. That's honestly a really low count of mountains, but I honestly don't need Jhoira half the time in this deck. So you guys know how the deck will pan out if the combo works. I'm going straight for Enter the Infinite. How the deck plays, I may actually need to end up putting more draw spells in here, because I will honestly run into one of these cards early, and not even using Jhoira. If I see Dream Halls early, and I have some big draw spells in my hand, like some of the ridiculous ones that sit there and let you draw like 7 cards, like this one for example, or this, or some of those draw spells tend to get really dumb, and I can chain these together for free off Dream Halls. And that's usually all it takes to dig into an Omniscience, or a tutor to get Omniscience, or the actual spell Enter the Infinite. Chaining big draw spells together is great. It has sometimes stuttered out on me because, as you saw, the giant pile of counterspells don't always draw me cards. May need to end up putting more draw in here. The new one from Origins is definitely making it. I may put Opportunity, may put like that Dragon's Prerogative, whatever. Some generic more draw spells, maybe less counters or situational counters. I like the idea of dropping the curve on the deck. It's just I don't want this to be 1v1, and playing this in multiplayer tends to put a target on my head. As I said, someone mistakenly decided to just exile my combo out of the deck on like turn 3 once, and I couldn't counter that. And I spent the entire game countering everything he played, because if he neutered me, I might as well neuter him. That was obviously rude, but it was also rude removing me from the game so early. That is what happens when you play combo decks, of course. But yeah, this is my take on Jhoira. 0 massive land destruction, 0 big creatures. It's kind of funny. This is not something anyone has seen yet at my table. They've seen the combo from Jeleva. They are actually unhappy with how smooth this combo is running compared to Jeleva. Jeleva was more shenanigans and chaos. This is more mainstream, straight into the combo if possible. It's not as fast because Jeleva can do this way faster because I can tutor the combo under her and go off. Sometimes it just depends. I have not had a chance to play this for more than a week against only 2